You said that reading the novel A Room with a View first made you aware of what fiction can do. In what way?
I think, again, like when I teach it, I'm very aware of it being a young person's novel. I think to have its largest effect, it's best to read it as a teenager or as a young person, because it's quite schematic in its way. But the lesson it taught me when I was a kid, that it's possible not to know oneself, and not to know oneself for one's whole life, I think is a very important one. Also struck me watching it that even though it looks antique, and the manners, I could hear people laughing at these holdover from Victorian manners, like Edwardian manners. But the problem with intimacy, I don't think, is solved, Neither in England nor America, despite, sexual revolution. And it's still very, very hard to be honest with oneself, to know oneself, and to be intimate with people. I don't think that's a problem that disappears. So I still feel quite struck by it, even though the structure of it, the architecture is so old.
In your acknowledgements to On Beauty, you write, as I mentioned, that it's a homage to Forster, but you say, Forster, to whom all my fiction is indebted.
Well, probably just because of that early intervention. Like, if you ask me, I would much rather say, all of my fiction is deeply indebted to Dostoevsky, but it just wouldn't be true.
I was thinking George Eliot, you could get away with.
But even Eliot I read later, I think sometimes as a writer you're a little in hostage to these early influences. And so I think I was quite heavily influenced. But then as you get older, I teach him every year, and, mainly I have arguments against him now, but still this fondness.
Why do you teach him every year?
Because I think it's a very good lesson to young writers that he's technically really extraordinary. And even writers from a completely different end of the spectrum, like Virginia Woolf, for example, who was friendly with him but had quite a lot of contempt for him as a person. But whenever he sent her a novel in manuscript, she would write in her diary, she was always impressed, by the technical achievement. And the way the emotion moves in that movie, it's the same in the book. No, your sympathies continually shifting, even for Cecil. I think more in the book perhaps than in the film. You feel this sympathy for him, this understanding that he's trapped in himself. One of my students very cleverly pointed out that he's a hipster. He's a proto-hipster. All he cares about is aesthetics. He lives a kind of... Life is an aesthetic phenomenon to him. It has to be the right food, the right music. When he says those Honeychurch, he's always talking about what's for dinner and what the mates get. He's properly a hipster. He wants to live an aestheticized life completely. And he's the one who makes me laugh most.